Hello, everybody. Welcome back. We are on to the last couple tissues for our histology study. This little mini lesson is going to cover muscle tissue and nervous tissue. I'm going to combine them both into just one video because there's, again, they're a lot smaller in content compared to the epithelium and connective tissues. So first, we're going to talk about muscle. There's three types of muscle tissue. There's skeletal, smooth, and cardiac muscle. The unique properties of muscle tissue is it has the ability to contract and relax. So contract is an active function. So you use ATP powered protein molecules to make the cells shorter, and then they pull on whatever they're connected to. So bones for skeletal muscle, or around organs for smooth muscle, or within the heart for cardiac muscle. So that's kind of the key characteristic of muscle tissue is it has the ability to contract. So we'll go through these pictures and I'll talk a little bit about some key characteristics for each one. So we'll talk about cardiac muscle, or sorry, skeletal muscle first. That's this one right here. Skeletal muscle is the fibers, the cells, if you will, of skeletal muscle tissue are long, skinny cells. So this would be like one cell right here, cut off, obviously, so it would continue going this way and this way. So they're really long. Sometimes they're called muscle fibers because they're so long, but that's just the muscle cell. They're multinucleate. So if you'll notice, there is multiple nuclei. A lot of times they're squished off to the edge of the cell, but there's multiple nuclei within each cell. When we get into chapter 10 and dive deeper into skeletal muscle tissue, we'll talk about why that is and how that came to be. But for right now, that's just a characteristic you can remember about skeletal muscle cells is they're multinucleate. They're very long and fibrous in structure. And if you'll notice, they also have striations. So these are all these little stripes you can see. So striated or striations means stripes. And again, we'll talk about why that is when we get into that material in chapter 10. So skeletal muscle is long, fibrous, multinucleated, striated. It's connected to your bones or underneath your skin, especially like for your facial ones, right? So I have muscles that go from my zygomatic bone down to the corner of my mouth, which allows me to smile, right? Or here on my eyebrows, it's connected to my bone or my tendon on my scalp, and I can lift my eyebrows, all right? So that's connected to the skin. But like to your bicep or your hand muscles like this, I can pull my wrist and I can pull my wrist like this, right? So these are skeletal muscles connected to bone. So that's why they're called skeletal muscles. They move your skeleton. Another characteristic about skeletal muscle is it is voluntary. You control it with your conscious part of your brain. So it is really the only thing that we have conscious control over besides our feelings and emotions and thoughts. But like as an effector, as a physical body part that you can control, it really is just limited to skeletal muscle. So those move your skeleton. The next one we'll talk about is smooth muscle. That's this picture down here. So smooth muscle, as you can see by the name in the picture, they don't have the striations. So they are not striped. They're smooth. They are not long and fibrous. They're spindles, which is kind of like something like this, little fat in the middle with a single nucleus. So that is your smooth muscle, and they're all kind of squished together. So what you'll see really in the microscope when you're looking at smooth muscle are the nuclei, kind of these are all these little darker purple specks. Those are the nuclei, and the cells would be like squished around them like this, all squished with the darker staining nuclei in the middle. And you can kind of see that here in this picture. I'm really bad at drawing drawing over those pictures. So smooth muscle, smooth, so it doesn't have striations. They're small spindle-shaped cells. They're uninucleate, which means they only have one nucleus. They are typically found in the walls of hollow organs. So that would be like the wall of your esophagus or your blood vessels or your small intestine, your stomach, your urinary bladder, the uterus. Those are all hollow organs, and the smooth muscle is found within the walls of those, lined by epithelium, right? Smooth muscle is involuntary. You do not control it. You cannot have conscious control over the contraction of your smooth muscle. We have what's called the autonomic nervous system, and that is what's responsible for controlling your smooth muscle. So once you chew and then you swallow, once you go past the skeletal muscle conscious control of your jaw, it is taken over by the smooth muscle of your digestive tract, and via peristalsis, that bolus of food just continues to move down your esophagus. It goes into your stomach churns and mixes and blends, and then squishes it on down your small intestine and then your large intestine until you excrete your waste. All of that is controlled by smooth muscle, autonomically controlled by your unconscious part of your brain. All right, then lastly, we have our cardiac muscle. So cardiac muscle kind of comes back to this characteristic of being striated. So you'll notice all the little stripes on the cells. They are typically uninucleate. So here, these would be the nucleus within the cells here in these micrograph, and then the dark purple things here in the picture. And you can see the striations. Okay. Another physical characteristic of cardiac muscle is the cells are branched. So for example, if I'm going to outline one cardiac muscle cell, we can see that it has kind of a branching characteristic to it. So here's another one, comes here, splits, and then goes out that way. So they're branching in nature. They're not long and fibrous. That's just for skeletal muscles. They're uninucleate, but I think your book says they could have up to 5. But it's not like hundreds of multinuclear, multiple nucleuses like we see with the skeletal. So branched cells, striated, also involuntary. Your cardiac muscles contract via signals from your autonomic nervous systems to set the rate. But even if you severed the connection between your autonomic nervous system and your heart, the heart muscle would still beat. It has what's called automaticity. Which means the skeletal muscles can actually trigger their own contraction. They don't have to have a signal coming in, but your nervous system does set the pace for when they contract, but they have the ability to contract on their own. And obviously they're found in the wall of the heart. So the heart is lined by the epithelium and has some connective tissue throughout, but the bulk of the wall of the heart is made up of cardiac muscle tissue, and it's found nowhere else in the body, so just there. All right, so that's our overview of our muscle tissue, so skeletal, smooth, and cardiac, sharing some characteristics, having some different characteristics, so make sure you're comfortable being able to identify and differentiate between the 3 types of muscle tissue. And then lastly is nervous tissue. So nervous tissue is our brain, spinal cord, and peripheral nerves and receptors. I'm showing here primarily the neurons, which are the major players in nervous tissue. So these would be like this big, multi-branching cell with a big nucleus in the middle, and it's got all of these branches coming off of it. So these are neurons, and they're more specifically called multipolar neurons, because they have all of these little branches coming off. And we'll see that more when we get into chapter 12 at the end of the term. We'll dive more deeper into the anatomy of neurons. So neurons are definitely a big part of nervous tissue, but also I wanted to point out all of these little speckles. See all these speckles that are usually seen in a slide of nervous tissue or neurons? These are the nuclei of what's called neuroglia. So neuroglia are the supporting cells. They are like the backup cells. They do not do electrical impulses. That's the job of just the neurons. But there are some neuroglia that help to maintain the ion concentration in that space between the neurons. Or there's some that are the cleanup crew, like macrophages or phagocytic cells that go and clean up. Or there's some that insulate the axons and the dendrites and kind of be like electrical insulator. So neuroglia are part of nervous tissue, but they are not the neurons. They just help to support the neurons, which their job is to conduct electrical impulses. Sending signals, picking up information from the receptor and the stimulus, sending that to a control center, processing that information, sending it out to the effector, kind of like what we saw in our homeostatic control mechanisms. So that's our nervous tissue. It consists of some of the longest cells in your body. So the neurons that are found like in your spinal cord that have axons that travel all the way down your leg to your toe and communicate, say, to like your toe muscle. So say this is my toe muscle here. Sometimes this could be anywhere, like 3 to 4 feet long, depending on how tall you are. So from your lower back of where your spinal cord is, you have that run all the way down the back of your leg, past your knee, down your calf, out to your foot into a toe muscle. So these are the longest cells. Where skeletal muscle fibers are long, they're as long as your muscle is long, right? So if I have my bicep that goes from my shoulder down here, right? So is my bicep, my guns. So my skeletal muscle, so that could be a good almost, 8 to 12 inches, depending on that muscle. Or I have some long ones that are like here in my forearm. That's pretty long, but that's nowhere near 3 to 4 feet long for the axons of these neurons. So they're crazy, the longest cells in your body. All right, that's it, right? So muscle and nervous tissue are at like 11 minutes for this video. So we've got one more to go along with this chapter before we wrap up is repair. So how do our tissues repair themselves and deal with inflammation? Okay, so I'll see you for that video next time. Bye.